Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Spectre. So Spectre is a carry hero, and as such, how do we think about her? Well, she is one of the best late game carries in the game, and although that's true now, it actually was true more like 4 or 5 years ago, because she keeps getting nerfed. She kind of constantly gets nerfed over and over and over again, but then for whatever reason, she kind of just creeps right back into the meta and becomes OP almost every year, it seems like. Regardless of the patch, she just comes back around and becomes good again, and that's pretty much because her innate kit, her abilities are just so intrinsically good in Dota. There's just so many things about her that you just can never count out. Even if they get nerfed, just the innate way that they work is just so good. She has global map presence, which can almost never be counted out, especially in Pro Dota. She has an ability that makes her tanky and use HP and armor like more efficiently than almost any other hero in the game, and she can potentially do pure damage to people. She takes Roche, she, kills people with pickoffs. When people are alone, she does insane pure damage to them. It's just so good to play this hero, even though she's received various different nerfs over the years. So, she is still thought of as one of the best late game carries in the game, even though she's kind of fallen off a little bit from, I think, that top rung, that top echelon, the number one that she was always thought of as. So, as such, that's her strength, that's how she is very good, but then, what are her weaknesses? Well, the typical first one that everyone thinks about is Break. So she has 2 built-in passives, and then if you have something like Nether Toxin from Viper, Hoodwink Ultimate, Silver Edge, anything that applies a Break is very good against Spectre, because obviously that just eliminates 2 of her best abilities, and so then it makes her less tanky, she doesn't do as much damage, and then she can be killed very easily. So Break is the pretty obvious one. But outside of that, in a more, global strategic way, how do you think about this hero and how is she weak in the way, not just Break, not just some spell, but in a more broad way? Well, obviously, like I said, one of the best late game carries in the game, and that's largely because she uses HP, armor, and items more efficiently, like I said. And so the counter to that is that she actually doesn't farm very quickly. So Medusa would be an example of a hero that, farms very quickly, but is also a late game carry that's one of the best ones in the game. She has split shot, she has snake, all of that kind of stuff. Spectre, on the other hand, doesn't really have that. She can, survive in the jungle with her ability. She can do some damage. She has a little bit of an AoE ability, but it's high mana cost, high cooldown. She can lane pretty well, but she just doesn't acquire items as fast as, say, a Medusa or even a Sven or something like that. Anyone that builds like Battle Fury, anything like that. But the reason why is because if she did, she would be extremely overpowered. So, the point is, a Sven item timing of 5 items is her item timing of 3 items. So once she gets to that 3, 4, 5 items, she just becomes extremely strong. But if you can't get there, if your team doesn't make the space, if you lose too early, if you're against a lineup that loves to take buildings, let's say any kind of Helm of the Overlord rush or Beastmaster, Lycan, anything that just runs at buildings, you can be in trouble because you need a spot to farm on the map. Even though you have global presence and you can kind of play away from your team constantly, you need somewhere to farm. You need to get items. You don't just flash farm. You don't split push the best. You're not super survivable on your own if people try to pick you off. So you need your team to make some kind of space and make plays for you. And that's kind of the biggest counter, I think, to her. Although she's good in low MMRs, and I would suggest picking her, be careful because a lot of times it can feel like you're doing everything, but your team just feeds away any kind of lead that you have, gives away any space, makes no, plays on the map for you, and that can feel a little bit hard to play Spectre in those kinds of games, especially if they have a lot of catch and a lot of breaks and other things like that. So just keep that in mind. So although she's one of the best late game carries in the game and she, does really well with items, she just isn't the fastest farmer, doesn't really buy Radiance that much anymore and those kinds of things. So just keep that in mind. You are reliant on your team, especially early on. So that's Spectre. That's how to think about her. Now let's jump in and take a look at her abilities. So now that we understand Spectre in general, we can take a look at her abilities and see how she's able to be one of the best late game carries in the game. So first we're going to take a look at Q. This is Spectral Dagger. Now this ability seems simple at first, but it's actually a pretty versatile spell. So you just kind of click it and you click in a direction, it shoots out a little dagger there that makes a path, and then you can walk over the path through cliffs, through trees, all of those kinds of things. Now, it's not just on the path. You can also kind of go away from it a little bit. So it has a pretty big AoE that you can use there. So it's not just the visual keep that in mind. So like I cast it here, and I can kind of go over here as well. It's a pretty big AoE. But yeah, you can go up cliffs, you can go through trees, all of those kinds of things. So it makes her pretty good at split pushing, pretty good at being survivable. You can obviously cast it in the lane next to the trees to survive and all of those kinds of things. She's hard to catch, all of that stuff as well. So it's pretty good in that way as an escape tool, as a survivability tool, all of that kind of stuff. The other thing it does is it does damage to creeps. So if I can get it there, let's see if it... yeah, it got the last hit there on the range creep, and that's the perfect example of what you kind of want to do in lane sometimes is, you know, you're pretty far back, you're sitting back, well, you can just cast your Spectral Dagger and you can secure a range creep last hit, or you can secure last hits in general. You can also use this ability to farm, just in the jungle or lanes or whatever, if you want to clear a lane fast, all of those kinds of things, because it does damage to anything it hits along the path. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can actually not just cast it in a direction, but you can click it on an enemy. So you see I clicked it on the Aghs there, and it followed him. So no matter where the Aghs goes, once I click it on him, it will hit the Aghs, it will follow the Aghs, and then it will make a path around the Aghs. You can also see he's slowed a little bit. But the other big thing is that you also have vision on him for the duration. So I might not be able to really get to a spot where you don't have vision, but it doesn't really matter where the Aghs goes for the duration of the debuff. He's slowed, and I have vision of him the entire time, which really, really helps to obviously catch people, to, you know, keep track of elusive heroes, even invisible heroes, anything like that. You don't necessarily see them, but you know where they're going. You can't really hit them. You see that they're invisible. You just see they're there. So it is very, very useful in that sense. So it has a lot of different things you can use it for. Like I said, being evasive, being survivable, damaging things, farming, keeping track of enemies, all of that kind of stuff. It's a pretty versatile, pretty good spell. So that's Spectral Dagger. Next, we're going to look at Desolate. So Desolate, this is her main damage spell. So pretty much what it does is whenever a hero is alone in a certain radius, you do pure damage. So here we'll show you when the Aghs is kind of far away from other heroes. We click the Aghs, and the Aghs is taking pure damage. You can kind of see a little bit of like an animation there that shows that he's taking pure damage. Now, if we have the Aghs come closer, I think the dummy target works, and we click Aghs here, he's not taking nearly as much damage. There's no real animation that you see there, and the same thing applies to creeps. So you see here, there's creeps I'm farming. We're just going to kill the creeps pretty quickly. We see I'm not doing any extra damage here based on the fact that these creeps are a little bit too close together. But now that there's no creeps left, I'm doing extra damage there. You can see with that little animation that plays because that creep was alone. So it's key to have this ability with pickoffs with other heroes whenever you're doing something, you know, you're ulting into a team fight or you're doing anything where you're hitting somebody and they are alone, they're not next to other heroes or they're not next to other creeps. This is how you're doing a ton of damage to enemies. And the same thing works on Roche. So Roche usually isn't next to other creeps, so you can do a ton of damage to Roche. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that this also works with Manta. So this is why Manta is bought on this hero pretty much every single game, almost no matter the patch, no matter the balance. You almost always buy Manta on this hero because it helps, you know, dispel things. It's good in, instead of buying BKB, it pushes waves, all that kind of stuff, but it also does a ton of Desolate damage. So you see this, I pop my Manta, we're all doing Desolate damage to this Aghs here, and it just does so much damage. It's also another way you can take Roche so quickly because of that pure damage. So this is probably the big reason why she's able to be such a good late game carry, but the other one is also her other passive, Dispersion. So we see here, Dispersion is basically a tanky spell. This spell does damage reflection as a certain percentage with every level, so it goes up. So basically just makes her tanky. So any kind of trade you're doing, if you have 100 damage, the enemy has 100 damage, you're just doing more damage to the enemy and taking less damage. Just straight up makes this hero tanky. It's basically a blade mail, but better. So it just lessens the damage she's taking, but it also dishes out more damage to the enemy when they try to kill you. So it's just a crazy good spell, crazy efficiency. So every single bit of HP that she gets, every point of HP that she receives from items and all of those kinds of things is just so much better on this hero because of this ability. It's what makes her really scale into the late game really well, kind of better than almost any hero. And this is why, if she farmed as quickly as some of the other heroes in the game, it would just be way too overpowered, because this ability alone just makes her so good, because of the damage mitigation and the amount of damage she does just with this. When people hit you, they take damage, which is kind of crazy, that built-in blade mail. So those are her main abilities. You can see how those two passives can be really, really good, and this pretty versatile Q spell. And then lastly, we're looking at the ultimate. So the ultimate here is Haunt. So this is her global spell. This is her global presence. Now, it has a fairly long cooldown at every level. You know, obviously it decreases in cooldown a little bit, but it's still a pretty long cooldown regardless. But what you do is you pretty much press it whenever it's up, and it creates an illusion at every single enemy hero in the game. And then you can actually press well, I'll do it again. You can press D here, the reality ability, and you can then teleport to any of these illusions. And so this makes you able to jump around in fights, do a bunch of damage. You also do damage to enemies in fights. You can also disable blink daggers. So, you know, let's say there's an Aghs or an Earthshaker or anything like that in the game. You can press Haunt to make sure they can't even, you know, counter-initiate and that kind of stuff. But the other thing you can see there is that that illusion was doing desolate damage to the Aghs here. So if enemies are alone on the map or enemies are spread out in a team fight because they almost have to be for whatever reason, then, you know, you're going to be doing a ton of damage with this Desolate ability. In fact, you can actually do like enough damage to kill an entire support if they're relatively low HP, just from pressing Haunt for the duration, if that, you know, Haunt illusion sticks on them and does a ton of damage if they don't have something like Force Staff or a Glimmer Cape or anything like that. So just such a good ability to be on the map, have map presence, have insane team fight presence, and all those kinds of things. It also makes the team fight chaotic for the enemy. It's very hard for them to know what's going on or where Spectre is and all of that kind of stuff. It also makes her kind of survivable too, because if you're getting gone on, let's say by 3 or 4 heroes, you can Haunt, teleport to the other hero across the other side of the map, and hopefully they don't kill you. You can, like, you know, Spectral Dagger into the trees and all that kind of stuff. There's just so much versatility for what this offers you in a team fight. It's just so good with that presence on the map. And the other big thing about it, because of the global presence, is that unlike other carries, you can be farming on completely the opposite side of the map. So let's say your team is taking a fight top, or they're smoking top, or whatever it is. You can be bottom. You can be completely on the other side of the map and just wait for the fight to break out. Then you click R, you teleport in, now you're at the team fight. So basically the enemy team can't really worry about where you are unless they're trying to pick you off, because you can always be at the team fight no matter where you are. So it's not just like, oh, we see Spectre bottom, it's going to be a 4v5. No, Spectre can be there no matter what. So those are Spectre's abilities, but the other ability I'm going to talk about very briefly at the end here, because it's basically another Haunt, is her Aghs. This new Aghs Scepter is just so good for her, because it basically makes this ability Haunt be a single target ability. It's like an added extra ability here. But it also is another ability that you can use with fairly low cooldown and not blow your Haunt. So in the past, let's say, you know, it's later in the game, you have a ton of items, you have, you know, Abyssal, you have Scotty, you have all this kind of stuff, and you see a support farming alone in the side lane. Well, in the past, you could press Haunt, you could TP to the support, you could kill them pretty quickly. Well, the problem with that is you just wasted, not necessarily wasted, but you did use your very long cooldown ultimate to get that kill in the side lane. Well, now you don't have to do that anymore, because you have this ability Shadow Step. And what Shadow Step is you can't, you know, cast it on somebody that you don't see, but if you do see a support or some hero or something farming in a side lane, if you see a hero at all, you can press F, you click it on the enemy, and then it creates a Haunt illusion that you can teleport to. So it's basically a mini Haunt for anybody that you can see on the map. And this is just so good, because it just allows you to have that other, you know, global map presence. It allows you to have that pick-off presence without committing your ult for the team fight. You know, you can save your ult for the team fight, but you can commit this to kill someone from across the map. It also breaks Lincoln, so let's say, you know, you want to have somebody charge with Spirit Breaker. There's a Spirit Breaker on your team. You can break Lincolns with this, and then Spirit Breaker can charge them, and then you can follow up with a Haunt or something like that. So it just offers so much versatility. It's relatively low cooldown for what it is. It's just such a good ability. It's basically like another ultimate for her. So those are all of her abilities. I'm not really going to talk about the Shard. It's decent, but it's not the best. It just kind of adds another extra bit of annoyance in there for enemies to deal with. But the Aghs Scepter here is the main one. But those are her abilities, and that's probably how you can see now that she's one of the best late game carries in the game. She's really good. Her abilities are so good. They scale so well. Even when they get nerfed, you just can never count out this innate kit that she has. So that's Spectre. Those are her abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how she's played. Now we're going to jump into a game of Nisha playing Spectre here. And basically, the Spectre laning stage is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. You usually go Q level 1. It's pretty much always the spell you go. I mean, it's very rare that you'd go anything else, just because your Spectral Dagger offers you so much. It offers you the ability to secure range creeps like he's trying to do there. Now, it's very hard, because if we click on the Earthshaker, He has Enchant Totem, which gives him 100% bonus damage. So it's pretty hard, especially with Spectral Dagger now doing 75 damage only on level 1. It's kind of hard to secure those last hits with it, but it's still something, especially once you get level 2, level 3, that you're going to want to be securing range creeps with that ability if you can't secure them with your right clicks. But otherwise, you're just kind of trying to passively get as much CS as you possibly can. That's honestly just Spectre. It's very, very hard for the enemy to go on Spectre, to kill Spectre. Obviously, it's a level 1. You're not super tanky yet. You don't have any levels in Dispersion or anything like that. But you see, like, there's not that much that they can do to Spectre. She has a generally high HP pool, pretty high armor generally, you know. You usually want to buy either, some regen to keep yourself up, because they will try to harass you, but generally you're just trying to get CS. You see the first few waves didn't go the best for him, just because they have a little bit of an advantage level 1. But as we speed up here, he also has an SF5 position. Not the worst, but actually surprisingly not the worst, but not the best. But basically, throughout this lane, as we speed it up, he's just basically getting CS wherever he can. Now that he gets a chance to get some free CS without them harassing him, he does so. And then eventually we'll actually see him get aggressive at times when the SF is able to, because the SF can do a decent amount of damage, but otherwise he's just kind of being fairly passive in lane. He's able to contest the Earthshaker occasionally when, the Earthshaker walks up, because the Earthshaker doesn't do the most amount of damage to him, because now he finally has a level in Dispersion and things like that. But yeah, it's honestly just a fairly boring laning stage. Creep aggro, pull the creeps back, try to secure last hits as much as humanly possible. Don't be scared to drag the wave under your tower if you feel like the enemy's going to harass you like they are. They're constantly spamming him with spells and stuff, so just keep creep aggroing back into tower. Just don't be scared of that. And eventually I'll speed it up a little bit more here. There are times where you can get aggressive if your support is able to get aggressive. So we're going to speed it up. Again, just passively getting CS. But now the SF is kind of back with decent mana, like basically full mana. He can get a full round of spells off, so he's pretty much getting aggressive now. I mean, the wave is pushing. They can't really contest because they don't want to take a bunch of hits from the wave. But you kind of see how aggressive he's being with the SF and the full mana and all the spells that the SF has. So now he's finally being aggressive because the nature of this hero, now that he's level 4 and he has 2 points in Dispersion, any damage that he's taking, he's having a better trade. He just trades so much better than every other hero. So most heroes wouldn't even be able to do that. It's a very hard lane with Earthshaker and Pugna. They dish out so much damage. It's very hard to go in on that, but he's able to. And as you see, it was largely due to his SF having full mana and getting aggressive and using his spells. So basically the only time that you want to get aggressive with Spectre is when your support wants to get aggressive. Based on your judgment of the game, that your support can kill them. You and your support can do a lot of damage, and so you go in, whether it's because they have a stun, or like SF, they have a bunch of nuke abilities, whatever it is, you kind of base your aggression off of your support. Otherwise, you're just passively sitting in the lane, passively getting as much farm as possible, and it's very, very hard for them to go on you. If you ever get in a sticky situation, you can dagger into the trees and those kinds of things, and that is really just the laning stage on Spectre. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple from there. You want to stay in lane as long as possible, because you don't jungle super well until you maybe get a couple items, maybe treads and stuff like that, a few levels and things like that. So you do want to lane as long as possible, take some kind of lane before transitioning to the jungle. It's not a very quick jungling hero, but it's very easy to stay in lane for a long time with this hero because of the innate passive ability to just trade better and sustain a lot of damage. So that's Spectre, that's her laning stage. Now let's jump ahead to a little bit later in the game. Now, really quickly, I wanted to show you this little sequence here at 8 minutes. So he's level 7, he has ultimate, but he doesn't have enough mana. He gets ganked by the TA, so he obviously has very, very low health. He's pretty lucky that he doesn't die here, especially with the bat pushing the TA in like that. So he has very low health, low mana, and look, he TPs back to base. This is something you can do on Spectre, is that if you ever get low in the laning stage, obviously you want to keep laning, but he's a hero that you can TP back to base, kind of like an Ember Spirit or something else like that, because, like we see here, you can basically use your ultimate to get back out to lane. Now, he uses this ultimate pretty aggressively, which is really good, with the Night Stalker ultimate, and they kind of do it in combo to kill the enemy carry, so that's definitely an option if you don't want to go back bottom or things like that. But you can also haunt back in to go back bottom if you think you can be kind of aggressive on the enemy and things like that. Obviously, he uses it this way to go top, and that's a really, really good use of his first ultimate. But it's one of those things where, in general, if you're very, very low later, once you have your ultimate and you haven't used it yet, you can go back and then ult back in to get kind of that free TP, that free regen, and those kinds of things. So it is something to consider on Spectre because, you know, that first level of ultimate, that first, whatever, 10 minutes of the game, 12 minutes of the game, you can be pretty helpful if you haunt in and use a dagger, but it's not always the best unless you get a numbers advantage like we just saw top with another very strong hero. Otherwise, you can use your ultimate pretty, off cooldown to get free regen and stuff like that if that's possible. So just wanted to put that in there, put that little tidbit, little thing that you can learn if you're low on Spectre and you need to go back to base without wasting a bunch of time walking back and forth, because she's otherwise a pretty slow hero. So the next thing I'm going to show you here is that his ultimate just came off cooldown. He kind of stayed top and farmed around top a little bit, and then as soon as his ultimate comes off cooldown, any time that his team is looking to get aggressive on somebody, get a pick off in the side lane, he basically just uses it off of cooldown. Now, obviously, in your games, maybe your teammates aren't going to be very aggressive. They're not going to look at your ultimate timing. They're not going to know when you have it up. You can, like, ping and things like that. But you can see how aggressive he's being anytime he has ultimate and he's looking to get involved. He's also extremely hard to trade with. I mean, look at this. His team's coming in and helping him. Obviously, maybe your team wouldn't do that to help you. So you do have to be a little bit more careful than he is, but he knows he's very tanky. He's hard to bring down, so anytime he has his ultimate up, he's looking to get involved whenever he can to get that little bit of extra, kill, steal gold or assist gold or anything like that to just amp up his farm, because obviously he doesn't farm super quickly. Now, obviously, the rest of the time you don't have your ultimate available, just farm through the jungle. Like, just do as much farming as you can. You see he'll farm all the way back to base now that he's low HP. If you can ever take a lane, if you feel safe taking a lane, of course take a lane. Lane creeps are way better. You want to push out lanes whenever possible, but just take safe farm. This is literally how you play Spectre in the mid game, and it's also why Spectre can be a little bit difficult in lower MMRs, because if your team's not running around making plays, if you don't have a Bat Rider and a Night Stalker, if you don't have people that are running around making space, making plays that you can get involved when you when you have your ultimate, or that can make space for you, it can be a little bit difficult to play this hero, because as you can see, he doesn't really do too much. He's just farming creeps, he's just kind of AFKing, and this is what you want to do on the hero. But if you're getting invaded and you're getting, aggressively ran at, it can be rather difficult if no one's making space, so just keep that in mind. But, honestly, from 8 to like 20 minutes, this is just what the hero does. Until you get your Aghs Scepter, you get Manta, you get an item or two, you're just going to be passively farming and maybe looking to get involved whenever you have your ultimate up, and that's pretty much the mid game for Spectre. Now, I fast forwarded here a little bit, and he just got his Aghs Scepter. This is an Aghs timing, that you usually want to get first, sometimes second after Manta, just depending on the game. But Aghs is just so core on this hero right now. Unless they change or something drastic happens or this hero gets buffed in some way, I just don't see how Aghs could ever not be one of the first 2 items that you get, just because, not counting Falcon Blade or something like that, but just because it's just so good. Because if you see, as soon as he gets it, the Bat Rider's in a side lane, he sees the monkey there, and he just goes right on the monkey with his Aghanim's ultimate there, the Shadow Step, and it's basically just another ultimate that he can get involved now. Now, anytime that these 2 spells are up, he's looking to get involved. You see, now, even though his team's getting aggressive bottom, he doesn't have his spells, so he's just looking to farm. Farm when you don't have your spells. As soon as they're up, you can get involved. That's pretty much the rule with this hero, and then just from there, that's kind of the rest of the game. That's literally how you think about the rest of the game. Farm when you don't have your spells up. When you do have your spells up, look to get involved. Maybe communicate to your team, hey, I have Haunt, ping it or whatever, and get involved. Hey, I have Shadow Step, I can kill somebody in the side lane, that kind of thing, and he just constantly uses it as much as possible, and that's pretty much how to play him after you get your Aghs and when you have a little bit of farm and a few items. So the next thing I want to show you is just the global presence of this hero. Once it's 20 plus minutes of the game, you have your Aghs and everything. Look how he gets involved with the Night Stalker. He comes down here, he ends up killing the Monkey King pretty easily, but then he also knows they're doing Roche based on the state of the game and just everything that was happening before. So he ults right back with his actual ultimate, gives vision, goes right back, the Night Stalker TPs in with his ult, and they end up taking a really good Roche fight because of the nature of this global hero. He can be anywhere on the map, pretty much at all times, as long as his spells are up. You see then the Radiant, they end up getting the Aegis kill, and the Night Stalker gets the Aegis. It was the perfect fight there, and that's all because of this global presence from the Spectre. Now, it's the same thing as before. It's when your spells are up, use them. I kind of keep repeating this over and over. And a lot of this hero is where to get your farm, how to eke the most farm out of the map. You know, get that little bit of farm that, you know, otherwise you wouldn't get. Put yourself in a dangerous position to get some lane creeps when you otherwise wouldn't. A lower MMR player wouldn't. These kinds of things. Being able to get as much farm as possible with as little space as possible. If there's a lot of space, maximize your farm and those kinds of things. That's the real difficult part of this hero. Otherwise, it's actually a pretty straightforward game plan in terms of, you know, using your ultimates, using your Aghs, those kinds of things, and positioning yourself on the opposite side of the map from your team so that you can assist them across the map with your abilities. And so that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Now, it's not always the simplest in the game. Putting yourself in the right position and doing these things, although it can look simple when you have a higher level player, you know, playing the hero, it's not always that easy. It's sometimes can be difficult. Sometimes if you're not winning like they are in this game, it's pretty even net worth lead, but if you're not doing all that well in the game, it can be a little more difficult to position yourself in the correct way and get effective team fights and those kinds of things off. But other than that, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You can see the global effect of the hero and how impactful it can be in team fights and those kinds of things. So the last part I want to show you is pretty much the quintessential map presence team fighting thing that we do on Spectre here, when your team is basically on the opposite side of the map and you position yourself in a way that you can participate in the team fight while pressuring a side lane. And this is the perfect example. Before this, basically he was just doing the same thing I talked about, kind of positioning himself, getting farm, these kinds of things, using his ults off cooldown, all of that kind of stuff. And now we see that the enemy is on the opposite side of the map, and his team is on the opposite side of the map, and he uses both of his haunt abilities basically to get into the fight when pretty much any other hero would have to TP in, where he basically just haunted him. It was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It seems simple now, but you have to have some good map awareness. You have to have good presence of mind to know exactly where to go and all of those kinds of things, and how to be positioned correctly so you can pressure the map in the right way and then participate in the right way. So it seems easy when you just look at it on paper, but sometimes in a game it can be more difficult. That's the perfect example of how to play Spectre. You want to be in the side lane, pressure a side lane like that when you know the enemy team is grouped up as 5. They had Aghs on TA, so they were going to try to push down a tower, and then he saw that his team was there when the team initiated, or when he initiated with his step spell. His shadow step spell just gave his entire team vision, and that's another thing you want to do as well. You don't always just want to save your ult or initiate first. You just have to ult at the right time. You want to ult to give your team vision, to make sure that, you know, you get a good team fight off. You don't want to ult at the worst times. That's another thing that's very, very important, is knowing when to actually press your spells, because you don't want to waste it. You don't want to push it at a time, you know, when your team's not ready to go in, or it's wasted because your team's already dead. You have to push it at a time where it helps your team out, but it also lets you haunt in and, you know, kill somebody in the backline, things like that. We saw that he immediately went for the backline, for the Pugna, as soon as he haunted in first, because he knows that's a support. He has a hard time defending himself, those kinds of things, and he doesn't want the Pugna to end up lending his team a hand. So that's another thing you want to do with Spectre as well. You haunt to give your team vision, but you also haunt and you can jump the backline. If there's something like a sniper, if there's something, you know, some hero that wants to sit in the backline, or some hero that you need to jump on to kill quickly that does a lot of damage, this hero is very, very good for that. Very good to get on those heroes that have a hard time. You have a hard time getting on if you don't have other kinds of mobility or initiation. He's also very good at that. So that's pretty much how to play Spectre. That's how to think about Spectre. It can seem pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but it's all about execution. It's all about learning when exactly to use the spells. It's all about learning where to get your farm and all those kinds of things, because once you get your farm and once you learn how to use your spells, you can be a really, really tough hero to deal with. If the enemy doesn't have the right lineup, if they don't have any kind of break or anything like that. You can kind of see that in this game with the development of the team fight, as I was talking, is there was pretty much just absolutely nothing that they could do against the Spectre. He pretty much had full HP the entire time. He was almost never at threat, even though the enemy had Aghs. So that's how to play Spectre. That's my Spectre guide. I hope that helps everybody looking to get into, you know, playing carry and playing this hero. It's a very fun hero to play. Can dominate games. Can be very good. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Links are all below for Discord, to request replay reviews, for my Twitch, where I do the replay reviews, for my Patreon, where you can request coaching, or, you know, you can just support me. I will ask people more and more in the future to support me, as for whatever reason my YouTube just is not getting monetized, and I don't really know why. But in any case, I appreciate all the support. I appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, guys, see you in the next video.